Okay. Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm João, the carbon removal supply manager for Latin America at Carbonfuture, and your host for today's webinar. For those who don't know, Carbonfuture, we built the trust infrastructure for CDR that seamlessly integrates the entire carbon removal life cycle and its chain of custody, bringing trust and integrity to every step in the process. Let me offer a very quick blueprint to our webinar today. We have a Q&A at the end, so please drop your questions in the chat. This webinar will be recorded, so you will be able to access the link to the recording after. Don't forget, please, to follow us on LinkedIn and social media. And please make sure to sign up for our amazing newsletter, which offers fresh news and reports about all things CDR. As I mentioned, I'm delighted to be your host today for this webinar on the future of biochar for Latin America. Biochar is this emerging climate solution that is rapidly gaining global attention, not only for its climate benefits, but also for its growing role in high integrity carbon markets. LATAM has this very unique opportunity to position itself as a global leader in high quality carbon removals, provided, of course, that we can align policy, technology, financing, and market standards. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm thrilled to have such a strong panel here with us, and I'm confident that today's conversation will provide clarity, challenge some assumptions, and inspire new collaborations. So without further ado, let me introduce our amazing panelists. So we have here with us today Trenton Spindler. He is the Chief Growth Officer at Puro.earth, one of the world's leading carbon standards and registries for engineered carbon removals. At Puro.earth, Trenton leads the global growth strategy, partnerships, investment solutions, driving alignment between voluntary and compliance markets in every major country in the world. We have with us also Luisa Marin. She is the executive director of the International Biochar Initiative, the IBI. The IBI has worked for over 20 years to give the global biochar community a clear technical baseline and shared space for coordinating and learning. Luisa brings direct experience with biochar projects. Before joining the IBI, she managed directly a biochar facility in Mexico, so she has a lot of experience on feedstock logistics, production, quality testing, you name it. Then we have Mariana Fernandes, which is the head of carbon credit sales at Aperam BioEnergia, which is one of the pioneers and trailblazers in Latin America, and actually the first company to develop and commercialize biochar-based CORCs, carbon credits that are registered in the Puro.earth standard. Mariana is a rising leader in carbon markets, bridging the gap between industrial innovation and measurable climate impact. Then we have Isaac de León. He is a lawyer, policy expert, an energy transition advisor with over 15 years of experience in negotiating complex infrastructure and offtake agreements across many, many sectors. He collaborates closely with initiatives such as the CDR FYR and the Carbon Business Council, where he chairs the Latin American Working Group, where he seeks to bridge the gap between policy, finance, and project development. And last but certainly not least, we have Diego Justiniano, which is the CEO of Exomad Green. Diego is a visionary Bolivian entrepreneur. He founded Exomad in 2011 to bring sustainability and world-class quality to the Bolivian wood exporting industry. And in response to the challenges posed by climate change, he created the Exomad Green division in 2022 to enhance sustainability across the Bolivian forestry industry and also, of course, tapping into the biochar industry. So without further ado, I'm going to ask some introductory questions, and I'm going straight here to Diego, and also kind of focus first in some of the project development on the ground reality of the biochar landscape in Latin America. So this question is directed to Diego. So Diego, based on Exomad's experience in the biochar sector, what would you identify as the key drivers of project viability? whether logistics, permitting, land access, capital, and what factors are most critical for successfully securing long-term offtake agreements for the carbon credits? I think that this is a major question that many suppliers that are registrants of this webinar have, right? Like, how do we access these global north buyers in the voluntary carbon markets? The
Thank
floor is
you,
yours, Diego.
Thank you, João, for the question and for the wonderful panel. Hi to all of the panelists and all of the audience as well. So first of all, I just want to start with something which I think it's key to understand. One of the main lessons that we learn at Exomad is that for a biochar project, it's not enough to only have secured the biomass. This is one single step of many things that you actually need for a project to become viable in this multi-step approach. I would say that first, you need logistics. You need to think this as a logistical business. You're going to need abundant, traceable biomass within a short radius of where you are going to have your facility installed. If you think in Exomad's experience, we handle thousands and thousands and thousands of biomass that need to come in on a daily basis to our facilities. And that would not be possible if we have to be transporting this biomass from the other part of the country. So I would say that the first challenge is for you, to assess the logistics of the business, and especially on the feedstock. Secondly, you need to think of the biochar business as an industrial capacity. You need to have industrial capacity in your, in your know-how if you want to build a biochar facility. These are really big operations that need to be operated 24/7, that need to be handled by specialized engineers, and that they need to be reliable to be able to do it at scale. So on that part, if you don't have the industrial expertise, you need to hire people that do. It's not enough, like I said, only with the biomass. You need to think of this with industrial capacity as well. Third, again, we go back to logistics. You have the distribution. It's half of that work to actually generate the biochar, but then you actually have to distribute it. And once you distribute it, be able to apply it in the proper sink site for the credit to be actually generated. So on our experience, you also need a tremendous amount of logistics to be able to deliver the biochar to the sink site, because you're going to be delivering probably a third, 25% of what your input was, but still it's going to be tremendous amounts of application that need to be done. And then I would not undermine the financial capacity that you need. You need to have before you start building, before you start committing, I think that it's very important for you to have a financial backing of your project, because it's going to take time for planning, permitting. It's going to take time to build the facility, and then it's going to take time to certify that facility under the standard you're going to do it. In our case, in Puro.earth. And then once you certify the facility, you have your first CORCs generated, then you have to go into the market. You need to, show yourself onto the market and let the market understand, assess your company, do the proper analysis that every buyer or trading platform does, so that they can verify that your credits are of high quality as well, and they can be commercialized. And then going to the second part of the question, which is how do you unlock long-term offtake agreements? I think that for us, I would summarize this in 4 points. First, quality. I think that quality of the biochar is critical. You need to be able to prove it without any level of doubt, with rigorous operational controls, where you need a high integrity MRB like the one that Carbonfuture provides, and we run it at Exomad Green. So you can certify the quality of your biochar, and your customers as well can, have a guarantee of that. Then I would also emphasize the impact that you have. In other words, the co-benefits. We run community programs measurable with which are measurable co-benefits, and this strengthens credibility on the project as well. Then I would say track record. It's very important. You're not going to be able to do a long-term offtake agreement as the first deal that you do. You need to first prove yourself onto the market, prove yourself onto the big buyers that you are going to be able to consistently deliver without missing deliveries, without having any trust problem. And at that point, once you have a good, clean track record, I think that part becomes easier. And then I think that if you want to go into the big long-term offtakes, like the one we have with Microsoft for 1.24 million tons, I think you need scale. So it's very important for biochar projects to have such a scale to be able to guarantee the deliveries and for the buyers to feel confidence. So in our experience as Exomad Green, I think that, on this two-part question, those are our inputs, and thank you for the question.
Thank you for the answer, Diego. For sure, there are a lot of moving pieces and stepping stones for you to reach the scale of a project like Exomad, but that was a wonderful overview. I will direct the next question, still gravitating around project development, kind of the on the ground reality of the projects. So I will direct the next question to Mariana. Again, we would love to get Aperam's experience on the sector as a pioneer and trailblazer such as Exomad. So, Mariana, we know that, of course, biochar, it sits in this intersection between waste management, energy generation, agricultural input, climate action, of course. So, from Aperam's experience, what has been like just the biggest overarching strategic lesson in turning this industrial byproduct into a climate positive revenue stream? Share a little bit about Aperam's experience.
Thank you, JD. Thank you for having me today, and thanks to Carbonfuture for organizing this session and driving meaningful conversation in the biochar space. So that's an excellent question. Let me start by saying that Aperam's biggest strategic lesson has been that biochar is not just a byproduct solution, it's a system solution. So turning biomass residues into a climate positive revenue stream required us to think beyond waste treatment and view the material as a part of an integrated value chain that connects operations, customers, and climate commitments. So we learned that success depends on aligning operational efficiency with the carbon strategy. So by redesigning our process to convert waste biomass into high quality biochar, we created a marketable product with measurable carbon removal value. And second, I think the market side matters as much as the technology that we use. So, developing a climate positive revenue stream required us to build credibility around things such as permanence and traceability, for example. So, engaging with certification bodies and end users, I think helped us shape a little bit the demand and ensured that the carbon benefits could be monetized. And finally, I think the process demonstrated that circularity can scale like only when it's treated as a business unit, not like a sustainability project. So once biochar became embedded in Aperam's broader industrial and commercial strategy, it unlocked investments, partnerships, and long-term value creation. So I think just to close, the strategic lesson that we learned is that climate positive product emerge when waste, energy, and carbon strategies are designed together, transforming an operational liability into a resilient revenue stream. Thank you.
Thank you. It's just amazing to get the details of both your projects. And I think this gives a lot of grounding for suppliers and investors and even buyers that are attending this webinar, trying to understand better the details of everyday operations. I'm going to take two steps back now to kind of ask about structural elements that will give traction to the biochar sector in Latin America. And firstly, I will start with Isaac here. Isaac, of course, is our policy expert. So let's talk about policy as this cornerstone for biochar today. So Isaac, you know that looking ahead, what are the elements of this, what I'm calling the emerging climate policy in Latin America, that you believe will have the greatest impact on enabling large-scale biochar adoption? Will it be carbon markets? Will it be agricultural incentives, waste management regulation, or something entirely different, right? So I know we've talked a lot about carbon markets here, and we know that is a central driver. For sure, there must be other elements that we are seeing here as levers for this traction.
Thank you, João, and thank you, Carbonfuture, for the invitation. I think when we look at biochar adoption in Latin America, it's important to understand that there's not one single policy lever or one silver bullet, no, as anything in climate action. I think there's large scale biochar deployment will happen at the intersection of these areas that you just mentioned, João, and the countries that take advantage of these policy areas are the ones that where signals will start to align. No, there's waste management and environmental regulation. That's the first lever, if you want to call it something. I think that's the most immediate driver. Brazil, Colombia, Mexico have open burning and unmanaged agricultural residues. And landfill disposals are increasingly regulated or even restricted. So when biomass goes from being free waste to a regulated liability, biochar then suddenly becomes a compliant solution. On the second part that you mentioned, agricultural policy, I think is hugely underestimated. Ministry of Agriculture recognized that biochar as a soil health or even drought resilience or a productivity tool. No, so you start to unlock public procurement, subsidies, and extension programs, and that creates domestic demands long before international carbon buyers step in. No? And third, is the carbon market development, which is key and it still matters. No, but more as a scaling mechanism than as a starting point. No, you know, Brazil just released at this time last year its ETS. Its ETS and it's ongoing. Its ETS discussions. There's a tax and offset framework in Colombia. Mexico is also about to implement their ETS, and they're also evolving in the taxonomy, which all of these can support biochar. But really, carbon revenues tend to be incremental rather than foundational, especially in early stages. And so they work best or once projects already solve a local problem and have an actual operational footprint. No, I think I'll close with this, that biochar scales fastest where policy turns an environmental problem into an economic input. So agricultural waste into feedstock, soil degradation into an opportunity to be resilient, and emission reductions into an additional revenue stream. No, I guess in Latin America, biochar won't scale because it's a carbon credit. It will scale because it's solving local problems first, and yeah, in carbon markets that reward that solution. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Great. I love that concluding remark. That's a good one. Still, and I guess my next question, which will be directed to Luisa, will kind of be this connective tissue between what you were saying now in your concluding remark, and just kind of trying to open up a little bit, double clicking into the agricultural sector. And other sectors, right, of application. So, Luisa, from your work, your extensive background, and also your work on the IBI, what's your perspective on the most promising large-scale applications of biochar today on a global level? But also, how do you see these opportunities evolving specifically for the Latin American region?
Thank you very much, Eddie. And again, thank you very much for Carbonfuture and this fantastic lineup of speakers at this panel. And let me tell you something. Before I respond, I would like to share a quick fact. As IBI prepare for its 20th anniversary, we have been digging through early files, and I found some materials from 2013, and those materials have the same opportunities that we have today. Sewage sludge pyrolyzers, nutrient recovery, circular sanitation, and use biochar for degraded soils. The ideas are the same. I think what has changed is the ability to act. And in 2013, there was no carbon market, no MRV, and very little investment, less than today, right? So those ideas stayed in paper, and we are ready to execute. And I would like to begin by saying that even though we know that agriculture is the main driver and probably the most known use for biochar, it's not the only one. And as Diego said, logistics build or destroy a project, because it's not enough that you have your feedstock secure, as he said, but you have to consider the logistics. Otherwise, you're gonna be suffering a lot. Because when he said that large amounts of biomass and then biochar enter and then exit, few people, unless they live it as Aperam does and Exomad does, when you see 100 tons of biomass in your backyard, or 200 tons of biomass, and you see that volume, it's hard to imagine otherwise you see. But just checking the opportunity is industrial wastewater to biochar, sawmill residues, sugarcane bagasse, coffee residues, mining, cement, construction materials, and steel, with the case of Aperam, wastewater and biosolids, of course, carbon markets, and insetting. Insetting looks very interesting for some large corporations that are looking for the carbonization of their own, their ESG goals, and also about the decarbonization of some of their own value chains or supply chains. And also the biocarbon, fossil replacement, that also looks strong, even though it will remove the possibility of issuing carbon credits, but it opens the possibility for other uses and probably go further distances beyond the restriction of solving a local problem. But those things are in diapers and baby steps, but it's growing. It's coming. And how do we see these opportunities evolving? Large agro industry joining the movement, as they say, the waste management of the residues is important. In some places, there are some taxes for residues, and some organic residues are no longer allowed to go into the landfills. So they're looking for other options, how to deal with that and how to revalorize those resources. Community projects will need support. As Diego said, it's not only about engaging in the industrial side, but you need to work with the community, not only because the methodology says so or the buyers say so, because that is the right thing to do in order to give them something back. And to, if we are going to ask them to share the resources, the residues, and we're going to need them to work in our project, so we better give them something back in training, revenue sharing, or something like that. Train buyers, and also, as Isaac said, about policy, train our politicians, our policymakers about these opportunities. And they have risks, they do have risks, but they have more positive outcomes. The risks, for me, the greatest risk is not doing it, is not even trying it, and not even trying to implement something. And someone would say about if these economics work without the carbon credits, mainly not, because there's not a biochar market for the biochar itself. So we need to work with the carbon credits. We're taking additionality. That's the main principle of this, of the carbon credit market. And I think this is something still going, emerging, but I think we're in the right place right now.
Amazing. That was fantastic, Luisa. And I love the time capsule moment where you mentioned that over 10 years ago, we already had the realization of the potential of biochar, but the difference now is that we have carbon markets offering us some tailwinds, and of course, a lot of available MRV infrastructure for high integrity and high transparency and traceability. And with this connecting element here, I will now ask Trenton, because I think it's the perfect moment to talk about the new Puro.earth as a new carbon standard and MRV. So Trenton, as I mentioned, of course, Puro.earth is one of the global leading carbon standards for durable CDR. So from your vantage point, where are you seeing the fastest growth in biochar globally right now? Again, how can we translate this to the Latin American narrative arc? What do you see in Latin America that is standing out within that story?
It's a great question, and thank you. And all, I've been loving listening to this because I think it's such an incredible opportunity, especially in Latin America. But what we see at Puro, and I think I saw some social media posts today that reinforce this, is right now the largest biochar suppliers are out of Latin America. That is what is occurring in the market today and will likely be the foreseeable future. That doesn't mean there aren't fantastic biochar projects in other regions around the world, whether it's in North America, Asia Pacific, Europe, or others. But as we discussed today, there's this massive opportunity and continued inertia that we need to see in this market. So globally, what we're seeing is biochar move from experimental to infrastructure. And I think if any was on a webinar I had just a minute ago, we spoke a lot about that. It is now moving to infrastructure, just not experiments anymore. The pipelines we see at Puro.earth are now measured in millions of tons of durable removal over the next decade, not hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands, but millions. So in Latin America specifically, I think three things stand out to us, though. There's immense, I mean immense, diverse biomass, from forestry registries to sugarcane to corn husk. We heard everything a minute ago. I won't be redundant here, belabor it. But a lot of it is still burned or left to rot. Agricultural export economies where biochar can't directly support yield, water retention, and fertilizer retention, it still ties to competitiveness, not just climate. So there's a lot of opportunity both in the credits, the actual usage of biochar, and more that's emerging. And it's not just experiments, but quantified data that both buyers and investors are starting to realize is a very good opportunity for the market What we would say is it shows that sustainability is good for business. Momentum in policy and pilots are accelerating from our point of view. New state and federal incentives in Brazil, example like Net Zero's work, Exomad, Aperam, and others that are in the growing industry are building partnerships across the region and globally to show that there's no longer just theoretical growth plans and economies of scale, but rather there's real infrastructure level plans for operationalization and maturation of this market in Latin America. So, from our vantage point as a standard and a registry, we think LATAM is a fantastic region where supply, impact, and cost are all starting to align today. If we can get MRV right, so thank you, Carbonfuture, and policy right, we think biochar here can really deliver global bankable removals, which is those that don't know the term, we are striving to get to bankability and fungibility in the voluntary market. And we think that Latin American biochar can do this quicker than some others. And we're already seeing this today with the likes of who I mentioned, like Exomad and Aperam and other suppliers in the pipeline. And this is a good thing. This is why we work with partners like Carbonfuture on DMRV at Puro and transparency, so that a ton verified in Bolivia or Brazil carries the same trust for a buyer in New York or Berlin, because that unlocks demand and scale. There is a glut of demand. We need it. We need better supply, though, and more of it. And we have a lot of great suppliers here, and we need to continue to support them to grow. And when I compare this to Europe and North America, as I mentioned earlier, I do think LATAM brings a slightly different profile to the global growth picture. While I support the other markets, I'd say Europe has strong policy and offtakes, but limited biomass and higher costs, especially in labor. North America has capital and technology, but it's still normalizing policy and grid level constraints, as many know. And then you have Latin America, which combines feedstock abundance, you have cost advantage with projects that can deliver deep co-benefits. And I mean that, deep co-benefits in rural communities. It makes it a tactile product, not just for the finite atmosphere, but for local groups of people in the populations. If we pair that with credible offtakes from overseas buyers, strong structures that address country level risk, and MRV that is really and truly aligned with global standards, which is what we're seeing happen today, we really think this region can be one of the growth engines for removals and biochar over the next decade, if not over decades to come. Just to close on that, I'd say the next step is to turn that potential into financiable infrastructure. That means helping projects in the region secure large long-term offtakes from international buyers and using standards like Puro.earth, a bit self-serving, but we believe we really do have the best methodology here, to de-risk cash flows, right? And provide a clear methodological North Star for investors and buyers alike. If we can give both developers and financiers the confidence that a biochar credit issued in Latin America will be recognized, valued, and trusted in future compliance and voluntary markets, then I think the growth we're seeing today becomes a durable investment rather than a short-term niche. And we believe in this wholeheartedly and truly, and think this will be an incredible opportunity to grow. And obviously, on the backs of amazing partners like Exomad, Aperam, Carbonfuture, and others. But thank you for the question. I think it's an amazing market and look forward to talking more about it.
Thank you, Trenton. I think you hit the nail on describing this multitude of tailwinds that we have, the potential for Latin America. I think I'll take two steps back here, still trying to discuss the structural pillars. We are reaching our second round of questions here, and I just wanted to point out that these are part of these questions are the pre-submitted questions that our registrants submitted when they were registering for the webinar. So these are on-demand questions that were answers that were highly sought after by our attendees. I will start with Isaac now. Again, just trying to look here at the overarching structural pillars for Latin America. I think Isaac provided us a good overview from policy, but now it would be quite interesting to double click into carbon markets. Isaac, from your perspective, of course, carbon markets are global, but policies are national. You mentioned a couple of them, a few of them on your first answer. What do you see as the coordinated regional or international frameworks that could, carbon market frameworks, right, that could help Latin America scale biochar while avoiding fragmented regulations, what we could call a balkanized regulation of the market? Do you see the national cap and trade systems? You mentioned a few. Article 6 from the Paris Agreement, anything that you saw that came out of COP30 as an outcome? What is your perspective on carbon market landscape for policy?
Thank you, João. I think one obvious lever is Article 6. So have an Article 6 club of Latin American countries that agree on a shared biochar rule book, share MRB, same sustainability safeguards, and clear rules for corresponding adjustments. That would help to keep policy sovereignty national, but while avoiding a patchwork of incompatible systems. You have all these countries around the region that are starting to implement an ETS. So having this Article 6 club would help. I think another easy one would be using ICBCM or BCMI as a de facto regional quality floor. So rather than having 15 different Latin American only quality labels, countries can lean on ICBCM and BCMI as a shared integrity floor, and then local safeguards on top of that. So yes, markets are global and policies are national, but Latin America doesn't have to choose between chaos and copy paste. If countries can coordinate on biochar rule book for Article 6 or ICBCMI for quality, that's how you scale biochar without ending up with 20 incompatible LATAM micro markets. I think also registry of interoperability is key. If you have multilateral institutions like the Inter-American Development Bank or the Caribbean Development Bank, help align registries and data standards across Latin America. I think biochar developers can register once they are recognized across borders, and then buyers get confidence that double counting is prevented by design. I think I'll leave it at that.
Amazing. That was a very good overview, Isaac. I will now, I guess, ask one of the biggest questions from the pre-submitted questions by our attendees, and I will redirect to Luisa, which I think will bring a lot of valuable points from her experience with the IBI and her past connection with projects. Luisa, how suppliers access finance in Latin America? This is the big golden question. What are the challenges facing suppliers, and what are you hearing about financing in the backstage of the biochar sector here in the region? Which governments have the best opportunities for support, subsidies, or so just like tap into the financing aspect, which is a big important factor for projects.
Well, thank you, JD. And as of today, I am not aware of any financing institution in LATAM dedicated to dedicating credit lines for biochar project development, buying technology, or even transforming biochar into other product. The largest producers in the region, as I have seen, this is my own conclusion, is that their biochar units began as startups, but they sit inside larger companies, which is the case of Exomad, Aperam, and Net Zero. And they have experience in manufacturing or processes or processing, or they also have experience in finance, operations, and again, logistics. So investors trusted their team based on past performance, not on the biochar project alone. And most of the new startups depend on the same mix elsewhere, not only in Latin America. The 3Fs, climate grants, concessional funds, and advance payments from buyers, which is the last or the least available option for financing because of the risk of implementation operations and the risk of not delivering when the time comes. And this only works, these advance payments, they only work when the project is strong and investor ready. And that is where there's this big gap that we cannot close yet, how to bridge that, how to close or how to curate projects in a way, how to find the best projects, curate them, and find those who are ready or willing to take the risk of growing and scaling the industry, right? So probably it's not yet the traditional bank, because as you said, bankability, they often require multi-year uptakes, and that could happen probably in Europe or in the US, but not in the global south. That doesn't happen there because we also have, political instability, and there are many things that can cause risks associated that they can be the risk or they can be mitigated, but all the parties need to understand how it works and how to reduce those risks, how to work with the project, how to work with the buyer, and how to work with the funders or those who want to invest. And talking about what are the three elements that we have seen, but they're not enough, but certainly help: letters of intent for biomass supply and end use, plus a solid team. These signals attract early investors. A blended structure where private or philanthropic capital absorbs early risk, and strong MRV and operations data, which make the project look like infrastructure, not a prototype. And as Isaac said, multilaterals, NGOs, and some governments show growing interest, but their lens differ from private developers. But regardless of who finances a project, all must comply with local regulations, social safeguards, recognized methodologies, and a reliable MRB system. Without this, nothing moves. And talking about a little bit the governments, Chile has a long-term climate strategy that includes biochar from crop residues as a mitigation option. And they have just built their first semi-industrial plant linked to soil health and carbon finance. In Mexico, as Isaac said, in its sustainable taxonomy, explicitly lists biochar as a climate positive in sustainable agriculture and again waste management. This is not a subsidy, but it tells banks and development institutions that biochar aligns with national priorities. And that classification creates the space for credit guarantees, green lending windows, and public development. But the thing is how to use whatever is already existing into the development, how to build that narrative. And Brazil channels incentives to methane residue and residue to energy projects, and that attracts government-backed investors into tropical biochar portfolios. I don't know how real is that in any of the countries, because even though in Mexico the taxonomy is there, nothing has been using it or taking advantage of it. So my view is simple. Supply will stay below demand until large buyers, public banks, and climate funds align around blended finance structure. Basic market structure like laboratories, training, technology, access to technology, and the technology as a CDR is there. What we need now is the financial architecture. That's my view.
Amazing, Luisa. Thank you for this masterful response to such a complex topic with many moving pieces. I will direct the next question before I start jumping back to project development and talking to Diego and Mariana again, but I will direct the next question to Trenton. I will just ask in these, we have 15 minutes to close our webinar. I'll just ask our panelists to be mindful of the time, the length of their responses, so that we can have at least 5 minutes by the end to answer some Q&A from our registrants. So Trenton, given the rising scrutiny around MRV in durable CDR, right? Do you foresee Latin American biochar projects needing materially different monitoring frameworks than, for example, US or European projects due to supply chain or governance difference?
It's a good question. My view is simple, even though it's a complex problem. The integrity bar should be the same everywhere, and that's the view that Puro takes holistically. A ton removed in Bolivia or Brazil must be as credible as a ton removed in any other market in the world. That way we meet the bar, and we can and should adapt to local initiatives, but meet the bar where it's needing to be met. So what that means, and I'll be succinct here on time, but please kick me out if you want me to be quiet, is that means the same principles, but probably different constraints. So core MRV principles don't change. Traceable feedback, quantified carbon content, demonstrated permanence, clear risk management. I can go on, I won't do so. What changes is in LATAM, I'd say, is the context. There's more fragmented supply chains at times. There is also more, I would say, smallholders and sometimes weaker infrastructure or land registries. So you do have to fulfill the difference in those areas and others to be able to accomplish the same that's done in other markets. And then I'd say where MRV needs to adapt in practice on feedstocks, framework should recognize more informal and probably distributed supply chains. It's hard. We're all working on it. Supported by a geotag collection data. None of this is exhaustive or fully formed opinions, but remote sensing, digital records, not only formal long-term contracts. So there's more work to be done there, but that's holistically for the whole market, not just LATAM, but LATAM can and should lead on it because it closes the gap they have. And then on process data, digital kiln monitoring, Internet of Things become more important. There's, application and co-benefits. Smallholder projects need, I would say, simple and standardized ways to document agronomic outcomes such as yield and fertilizer use and soil health. But all these things are being worked on. And then there's governance and trust. In places where public institutions are still building capacity, I would say independent standards and registries provide today and very far into the future very large support and extra layers of governance and dispute resolution. And Puro fulfills that need globally very, very often. So over time, the goal is alignment, national systems and international standards working together, not competing frameworks, I'd say, that confuse developers and buyers. And then finally, just to close this off, to give us a couple minutes here, there's reassurance to buyers. I would say the message to buyers, both here and in the broader market, is that you should expect the same level of rigor from LATAM projects that are also leading in that level of rigor today. So the path is being set and cleared. The difference is that we can rely more on digital MRV and local partners to deliver the rigor in a way that works on the ground operationally. Because we have to balance both what the market wants for buyers, but also what do we have to do to actually execute and deliver these projects. And if we get that all right, non-exhaustively, I think a LATAM biochar credit is not a special case, and that's a good thing. It's a high integrity asset that can sit confidently in any global portfolio against any other high integrity environmental assets. That's our goal and our view at Puro, and we think LATAM, and we truly mean this, can and should fulfill that leadership role. Obviously, there are uniqueness here that we have to solve, but I think parties like Carbonfuture, Luisa with IBI, and others are working on to solve and think through how do these policies, operational realities, and everything come together so that we don't have large increases in cost. Rather, we have the opposite. We get to economies of scale, decreases in COGS, cost of goods sold, and therefore making it, again, a more bankable and fungible asset, which is what banks, buyers, and others want today. They want to buy our LATAM biochar credits. They just need more of them, and they want to see more and continuous rigor like we've had today. But back over to you. Hopefully that was a nice, quick answer, giving us a little bit of extra time.
No, that was wonderful. That was wonderful. And I totally agree. We need more Latin American projects to prove exactly what you just said. I see a big silver lining and there's a lot of optimism here. So, yeah, you again hit the nail on your response. Thank you, Trenton. Now, again, back to our project developers for this last mile here of our webinar to kind of have some more of the details of project development and the vision of these trailblazing project developers. Diego, this one's for you. Exomad Green has often emphasize the wider co-benefits of the biochar production and its projects. So from your experience on the ground, which social and environmental co-benefits have proven most significant, and how do they just strengthen the overall value proposition of Exomad Green's projects?
First of all, I think that for Exomad Green, co-benefits are not an add-on. They are central to our project design. And what we see on the ground is that the social and environmental impact can be just as transformative as the carbon removal itself. In Exomad Green, we have 4 programs under our Green Innovation Program. We have agriculture, health, education, and urban transformation. I'm just going to go through one since we are short on time. It's our agricultural program. First of all, we provide biochar for free. Basically, we provide it to all the agricultural community free of charge, and where they don't have the means to apply it, we help especially the indigenous communities apply the biochar for them. We have thus fertilized or improved, enhanced over 20,000 hectares. We support over 260 farmers. We have conducted over 100 field studies. And on average, we have a 15% average yield across different crops. This translates to better water retention and better water usage, lower fertilizer dependence, and stronger soil resilience. These outcomes, first of all, they support food security in the vulnerable rural regions where we operate. They strengthen the community welfare. They reduce deforestation pressure as healthier soils reduce the need for expansion into these forest areas. And we advance in several SDGs. So going to the overall question, co-benefits are extremely important in bringing value proposition, as we truly believe that when you can prove without any level of doubt that you're not only capturing CO2 and storing it permanently in biochar for hundreds or thousands of years in a proper sink site, but you're also helping improve the livelihoods of the people in the communities where we operate, that truly brings value to the credit itself.
Amazing. Thank you, Diego. I think that you actually answered directly one of the questions in our Q&A chat. So that was great. Finally, I think I will end up here with Mariana in the second round of questions. Maybe I'll invert it a little bit, because since we only have around 6 minutes left, I'll try to get one of the questions that is in the Q&A chat. And I think Mariana could quite well answer it. So, Mariana, from Aperam's perspective, and of course from your vision as the head of carbon credit sales of the biochar project in Aperam, what strategies would you recommend when a project produces biochar in a country where there is no established market?
Yes, thank you. Great question. So, in many Latin American countries, including Brazil, there is no established commercial market for physical biochar. So, a real example is Aperam. We operate a large-scale biochar production, but we do not sell the material. Instead, we give the biochar, so it's free to local farmers that live near to our operations. So this approach has been very effective in lowering adoption barriers and building trust, because it helps the farmers to directly experience the agronomic benefits without the financial risks. So, from our perspective, over time, this kind of early exposure can help stimulate future demand and create like the foundations for a market. So I don't know if who asked is in a similar situation, but giving biochar away can work. Maybe partner with farmers, run small pilots, and keep the process simple for them. It's easy if they really understand how it works. So field demos, local cooperativeness, and extension services can also help make sure that the material is applied in the right way. And I think a DMF such as Carbonfuture can help you record where the biochar goes, how it's used, and ensure that it's actually being applied. So I think combining clear application guidance for farmers, and you can create like a responsible and transparent process to build a future demand. I try to be as quickly as possible. Sorry.
That was great, Mariana. You left us actually 3 minutes. I'll try to squeeze one last question from the Q&A chat. So, Trenton, this one is for you. There is a project in Argentina that is asking the following question. They are trying to close they have been developing it for 3.5 years. You're very close to securing funding. And the question is specifically is there a specific buffer of the CDR credits that you keep for the project, or is the strategy to sell 100% of the credits created? What's your perspective on that, Trenton, from a standard perspective, from Puro's perspective?
Yeah, I'll give the 60 seconds or less. So today, Puro does not maintain a buffer pool like other standards and maybe avoidance carbon markets. What we would encourage those to do, and I could be very specific here, there are general rules around output audits and how, as all these biochar suppliers are on panel, no, there's nuance to that statement and how discounts are made and how measurements are performed. But holistically, we do not require a buffer pool. Now, with that said, I would say that there are buyers, buying groups, and other investors and others that would require a request or prefer to have some type of buffer or equivalent buffer analog pool set up. So it really is bespoke to who you're working with, where you're working with, and what those buyer requirements are. Some will require it, some do not. As you mature and get larger, we have seen the need or requirement for bespoke buffer pools to be decreased significantly, obviously with scale and maturity and continuity year over year, issuance over issuance throughout the year. Those get easier to justify, improve quality, integrity, and time to revenue. So that's the Puro formal opinion, but obviously it's different for those in the market that need to operate, which is why we allow for that flexibility today, because we know that not every buyer and supplier have the same relationship across the market in an emerging market. That'll likely change in decades, but today let's make it easy for you all to transact and reduce as many barriers as possible for you all to be able to secure as much demand on as much volume as ethically possible. Again, we want to make sure we have scientific rigor and credibility underpinning all of this. But thank you for the question. Happy to extrapolate more on that. And if those have any questions related to specific pathways, I always encourage you to reach out to myself or Puro, and we're happy to give you an analysis or help on our current methodologies and how you would fit in. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Trenton. I'm so impressed with our timing. We're actually closing perfectly at the hour. Thank you so much, everyone. I just want to, extend my sincere gratitude to everyone who joined us for these great insights from our fellow panelists. But I also thank our attendees' time, your questions, your engagement. It made this conversation incredibly valuable. I hope we could answer more of your live Q&A questions, maybe on a next Chapter 2 LATAM webinar. I hope the ideas today, they not only informed you, but also inspired you to explore new possibilities and really take that next step to scale or start your project with confidence. And before we close, I'd just like to encourage you again to stay connected with us. We will be sharing the link to the recording soon. Once again, thank you for being here, and we look forward for see you in our next events. So, ciao.
Adiós, gracias.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.
You.